So I have a question for you all. So I am very bent on just growing out the Ruby community, content space. I want to see more podcasts. I want to see more content. Like, how can we get more creative? And I feel that this show is very creative. Do you feel that you're part of that Ruby content initiative?
I think so. I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to be. And I kind of saw what I was seeing was that there were a number of podcasts, but there wasn't any vidcast. There wasn't much in the way of vidcasts going on, at least not live ones.
Right, and yeah, not live ones.
Right, where audience could interact and talk. Speaking of audience, hi Aaron, Colin, welcome to the show. Glad you guys could make it. But yeah, and so I thought, well, it would probably be good for us to be able to have a live thing where we could start to interact with the audience and actually have a little more back and forth. Not that I have anything against podcast formats or pre-recorded stuff. I think that's an important part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
But I just saw I guess a niche that we could plug into that wasn't going to kind of compete with very established podcasts, because that was just a mountain climb I didn't want to do. But
well, I will tell you. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'll say I was on the RailsConf panel. So as a speaker on the panel, and then I moderated the RailsConf at home session, which was so fun. And that was really my first experience of having a live audience that I could interact with and get questions from. And in some ways, it's extremely nerve-wracking, but it's also great for content because it really can take the conversation in some weird space that you never anticipated, and you get genuine answers. Because for my show, at least, I really try to pre-prep my guests as to what we're going to talk about. Do we end up somewhere totally weird and different? Absolutely. And those are some of my favorite episodes. But it's guaranteeing that people are going to get those questions ahead of time is how I get a lot of first-time speakers to be on the podcast. But I totally get the allure of having, those listeners there to ask questions. But you also have to be prepared if they're quiet and shy. And yes. The worst is after an episode where someone comes up to you and you're like, I had a question, but I was too nervous to ask. And I'm like, no, it was such a good question. And then I convinced them to be on the show. But yeah. It is an interesting dynamic.
Well, it's, and this, I learned, used to do a lot of video game streaming. And, I kind of learned, I developed a lot of really good friendships just from the chat, and that dynamic of interaction. And I said, I really would like to have that in a programming environment, a dev environment, because I like dev and project management. And it's, that was a good experience. And I've got a lot like the girl that did all the artwork for this show is a girl in Australia that I met through streaming. We've become friends, and she's an amazing artist. And I never would have had that relationship if we weren't streaming and doing the live stuff. So, I'm kind of hoping to build that kind of dynamic here as well. Because I think relationships are important, especially after the past 2 years of everybody being locked up in their caves. And this is a good way to...
It's so funny that you say that, because I have a controversial feel on that. I feel like, so I used to always be on the go prior to the pandemic. I was playing roller derby. I was a fitness instructor on the side. I was doing a bunch of crap. So I was on the road constantly. I was always running around, and I feel that forcing myself to be at home a little bit and being comfortable with that has actually enabled me to strengthen my relationships within the Ruby community, because then I was able to attend meetups remotely, meetups I never would have been able to go to. WNB, the Women Non-Binary meetup group, was formed during then. And that is my favorite community to be able to talk to in real time about Ruby. So I totally get where you're coming from, Chris. And, returning to conferences was really exciting, but I'm also kind of digging the at-home thing. So.
Oh, I love the at-home thing. But, and this, I think this is a good way to build relationships. Like, if we didn't have this show, I never would have talked to you probably.
That's
You know, I never would have
possible.
talked to Andrew. I never would be talking to Colin or Aaron, you know?
To be fair, Colin, Aaron, and Andrew talk to everybody.
Well, I mean,
Maybe.
true, but I never would have met them to be able to talk to them. But the show gave me a reason to read, because I'm severely introverted. But the show gave me a reason to reach out to people and say, hey, you'd like to, come have a chat with you.
That I totally agree with. There are times that I have literally been shaking going into an interview because that person has been my absolute freaking hero. I do not care about celebrities whatsoever, but you see me at a conference and I see a Ruby celebrity, and a Ruby celebrity is just anybody who I think is a badass. I get really nervous and sweaty, and that person probably just is a normal person, but I find that stuff really exciting. And there's still some people in the Ruby community I have not reached out to interview because I'm still that nervous. So yeah, I agree, Aaron, like definitely guilty.
Yeah. And it is hard to kind of reach out to that. When you kind of forget as you read all these people and you read about them and you see their picture on, some blog posts and stuff, and you start thinking, my gosh, they're like superstars. I can't reach out and talk to them, and you get intimidated by Twitter and you get intimidated by all the stuff, but then you end up in a situation like this. And this, I think, this dynamic is a lot less intimidating for people to get together and talk than to actually be in the same room. So it seems like a lot more comfortable way, at least for me, to meet people, so
I'm
Out of
curious.
curiosity.
Oh yeah, go for it, Kristen.
So, talking about Ruby content, we're Rubyists, Chris and I, and the name of our show I think is awesome, but Rubber Duck Dev Show, but it's interesting. The Ruby's not in it, so I wonder if we've kind of hurt ourselves at all not having Ruby in it. Chris, have you ever felt that at all? I mean, because I know reason why we chose this, we wanted something a little bit more generic so we can talk about all sorts of topics from project management to testing that is not related to a language.
Yeah, such a good question. I would say the number 2 most listened to Ruby podcast is the Bike Shed, and the word Ruby is nowhere near that. I definitely took that into consideration whenever I was rebranding the show. But Aaron's on the chat right here, and his podcast is named Framework Friends, and the word Rails or Laravel are ne'er to be found. But I think having a good tagline, and I think you've done a really good job within the website and your metadata, is the way to do it. But also, I feel like Ruby Weekly is really the unlock for that. So I don't know if you've been featured in Ruby Weekly yet, but reach out to Ruby Weekly. They're always looking for content and say, hey, by the way, I don't know if you've checked this out, but we actually are quite Ruby focused on this specific episode. We think this one's really great.
Yeah.
When I was teaching boot camp students, so a long time ago, I am a boot camp learned Rubyist, and I'm very proud of that. I also mentored students. And so I would have them write out articles, and then I would help them write emails to Peter Cooper at Ruby Weekly to convince him to publish those articles. And at the time, they were just so excited to have someone pushing to them as opposed to them having to pull this content out of Twitter. They were very appreciative. So no, I think the name of the podcast is fantastic. And we talked about this in the pre-show, right, for merchandising.
Yeah. Well, one can only hope.
If you like this clip and want to watch another one, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the full video, you can click here.